Welcome to Sci-Fi Quantum Archives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore. It began without warning. No preamble, no detectable source drift, no anomalies in the background radiation to suggest incoming change. Just a pulse. 1 second, the skies above Cerro Macon swam with the usual silence of deep-field scans. The next, something cold threaded its way across the low-frequency band. A throb, faint but undeniable, landed squarely at a point where nothing should have lived. Not anymore. The dish had caught it clean, without distortion. A pinpoint origin, consistent, directional, stubborn in its clarity. No echo bounce, no Doppler smear. One of the technicians leaned in, adjusted the gain, thinking it a fault. Sunspot interference, maybe. But the shape held. Symmetrical rise, sharp fall, repeat. Like a whisper pressed through stone. No one spoke at first. The lab settled into the kind of quiet that always follows data that doesn't belong. Chairs didn't scrape. No one reached for coffee. Only the soft hum of machinery and the low sweep of signal on the monitors. Red traces drew themselves on black like someone carving slow lines through soot. The source sat where SN27321 once burned, a G-type star catalogued, tracked, archived, and eventually pronounced dead. Its core had collapsed into remnant drift 200 million years before anything on Earth had bones to bury. No gravitational tug. No X-ray remnants. No heat signature worth charting. Nothing left. Nothing that could speak. Yet something was speaking. They mapped the pulse against background noise. It held its shape across 4 detections. Pulse. Pause. Pulse. 2.7 seconds apart. 5.5 second break. Repeat. The pattern resisted coincidence. One of the interns suggested Morse, but there were no letters in this. It was older. Slower. Like the idea of structure trying to press itself through noise. Still, nothing conclusive. Random bursts happen. Cosmic background belches. Debris collisions. Ice crystals snapping under stress. But this wasn't static. This was a rhythm. By the end of the first hour, the readings had spread. Subarrays across the Atacama picked up the same pattern. The signal's clarity held across latitude and aperture. Time drift, 0. No known object matched the trajectory. Nothing orbiting, nothing passing. Just emptiness grinning back. A senior analyst flagged it for review. No one filed an alert, not yet. Outliers happen, and most fall apart before a second look. The observatory had seen too many amateurs call fire over coincidence. But this didn't fade. It stayed, waiting, like it knew someone would listen. By the second day, they had full spectrograph. The waveform came back laced with harmonics. Low-order modulations nested beneath the main burst. Noise, perhaps, or coded substructure. Either way, it carried intent. Not human, not machine, but intent in shape, in rhythm. Like sound that wanted to be read. Not everyone agreed. Half the lab held to environmental interference, cosmic shear, hardware ghosting. That last one got real traction. Ghost signatures weren't rare. Old satellites dumped out all kinds of nonsense, and the desert heat sometimes played havoc with receivers. But ghost signals didn't phase through vacuum with this kind of precision. A third sample came in overnight. Same coordinates. No deviation in amplitude. The burst's tail carried new resonance, lower than before, but still linked. As if the signal was correcting itself, tuning its own voice to match whatever was listening. Someone finally ran a decay curve. The signal was aging backward. Not flattening. Growing. No one moved for a long while after that. A few stared at the screen like waiting for it to blink. A pulse from a dead star, fine. Random patterns, fine. But a signal that gains order over time, that sharpens instead of crumbling? In the records there's a time stamp no one talks about. It marked the first instance of harmonic buildup. Most think it was coincidence. But the signal arrived at exactly 3:14 Universal Time Coordinated, same as the old star's light extinction estimate, calculated 2 decades ago. Maybe the computers made a rounding error. Maybe someone nudged the model too hard and got superstition in return. Or maybe nothing dies clean in space. Not even time. Catalog records don't lie. They grow outdated, corrupted, overwritten, but they don't lie. Coordinates logged for SN 27321 went back 43 years, cross-confirmed by 4 observatories across both hemispheres. Every entry said the same thing. Terminal collapse, 0 survivability. Final light curve sealed, archived, dismissed. The sky forgot. But memory lingered in signal. When the burst came, they pulled star maps first. Sector grids loaded one by one, names, numbers, remnants. The patch in question lay cold, crosshatched with archival note. Radiation-free. Movement-free. Nothing to chart. Just coordinates overlaid with silence. Closer inspection brought no comfort. No gravitational lensing. No parallax drift. No warping from nearby objects. A clean frame. The deadest kind. Nothing bent. Nothing pulled. Yet signal held to that center like a pin through cloth. Instruments recalibrated. Altitude shifted. Weather cleared. Still it came. Single point origin, unshaken by wind, terrain, calibration error. It wasn't background hum. It wasn't noise. One technician ran a mass sweep. No pull. No measurable weight in that quadrant. Not even dust scatter. No ion trail, no cooled rock, no debris halo. It shouldn't have been able to send anything. It shouldn't have known how to aim. But the emission aligned perfectly with Earth's orbital track. Matched trajectory to within half a degree. From nothing. The printout that followed landed on the desk with no ceremony. It didn't need one. No signal had ever passed through an extinct sector with this kind of focus. No extinction field had ever emitted post-collapse energy that resembled intent. Spectral analysis pushed it further. The burst carried hydrogen alpha bands at levels usually reserved for active stars. Not remnants. Not fossils. Active. Vibrant. With a decay profile curving forward instead of down. But no source occupied that space. No secondary burst came that night. Just the one. Like a finger pressed to glass once, waiting for the sound it left behind to be caught by someone still enough to hear. The team parsed through old note. Not digital logs. Actual papers, faded, grease-marked, handwritten by researchers long retired. One notation stood out. A margin scrawl from an intern years ago. One sentence. No timestamp. No context. Why would a dead star line up to speak? That line got passed around without anyone willing to say it aloud. Quiet hands moved the paper from one station to another, eyes staying too long on the curl of each letter. Questions filled the room but no one reached for answers. There weren't any. Coordinates triangulated. Maps redrawn. Every dataset confirmed it. Emission locked on a location where existence had ceased, yet frequency arrived with clarity no dust cloud could mimic. No gravitational well pulled it out of alignment. No celestial drift tugged it off course. Each reading came back clean. That space should have forgotten how to speak. And yet something in it remembered just enough to aim. No introduction was necessary. Her presence changed the room before her voice touched it. Chalk dust still marked the hem of the coat, scuffed boots beneath fine wool, eyes made for measuring what others missed. She listened first, always. Let the data run its shape before cutting it open. The signal had gone untouched for 3 days. No change in amplitude, no noise build-up, no sign of source evolution. That alone unsettled more than half the staff. Natural signals degraded. They smeared at the edges, fell apart under their own momentum. This one stood still, humming low like a throat about to sing. She watched the waveform cycle. Once, twice. Her hand moved across the trackpad, slow, careful, surgical. Filters came off. Noise gates dropped. What remained held its pitch longer than it should. Held it too well. Entropy curve failed to slope. On recalculation, the waveform didn't decay. It sharpened. Not a clean line, not synthetic polish. Something else. As if time inside the signal worked in reverse, climbing toward definition. Spectrogram split under her cursor. Inversion showed temporal growth, a backward bloom. Tails of the signal carried more energy than their front. Each repeat cycle came in stronger, richer, louder by fractions. Barely measurable, unless you expected signal to die. One technician tried to argue artifact drift. She nodded once and asked for the timestamp. Not the reception time. The one buried in the modulation layer. They found it after 2 hours of deconstruction, nested beneath triple encryption and amplitude balancing. June 19, 2025. 30 days ahead. Silence stretched. One monitor flickered. Someone left their tea untouched long enough for the skin to break. Signals don't date themselves. Not naturally. Not across interstellar vacuum. Not from a coordinate devoid of matter. Yet there it stood, stamped clean into the carrier tone, with sync accuracy down to microsecond. None dared suggest transmission error. None could explain how a future date embedded itself in a frequency emitted from the grave of a star. She closed the panel, not with finality, but with a look that made the others stop breathing through their mouth. Entropy reversed itself only once before in their archives. Once, and under lab-controlled graviton manipulation. And that experiment never left simulation. What showed on screen wasn't a product of Earth's physics. At least, not as they understood them. The signal had not finished. It was mid-sentence. Still forming. Still choosing its shape. She stepped outside briefly, not for air, but for silence. Desert winds skimmed the concrete wall. The sky above was moonless, stars cold and bare. That quadrant, once the mouth of a burning sun, looked unchanged. No glow. No pulse. No shimmer to betray intent. But something had spoken. Something unfinished. And it had named its hour. Orbital confirmation arrived without fanfare. No blinking alerts, no high-priority tag on the relay. Just a signal file wrapped in a routine timestamp, as though it carried nothing worth naming. Payload identical. Burst profile unchanged. Encoded with the same unnatural precision. The difference lay not in content, but in timing. Low-orbit instrumentation caught it 12 hours after the ground array. Same frequency. Same delay curve. Same embedded date. But the orbital lens caught more. Microscopic shift. Faint oscillations nested beneath the waveform, too subtle for terrestrial dishes to hold without atmospheric distortion. They weren't noise. They were timing beats. Someone in tracking matched those pulses to celestial rotation. Not present alignment. Not past. Future. Planetary positions that hadn't occurred yet. Projected states, months ahead, charted by orbital modeling systems and deep sky simulation. Mercury's axis shift. Venusian albedo drift. Earth's tilt 2 fractions wider than current values. Not predictions. Confirmations. The pattern matched future space. Not Earth's memory of it. A forward-cast sky. One that hadn't happened but was already written into the signal like a signature scrawled across unopened pages. Equations came quickly. Papers published behind closed doors. The phrase began passing between analysts before it reached the room where it mattered. Future-aligned frame of emission. Not forward in time. Not time travel. Worse. Geometry. The signal had not come through time. It had been routed through spacetime, along a path only visible if traced backward from what hadn't yet occurred. No object could survive that trajectory unless its existence relied on probability fields, not mass. The conclusion formed itself, slow as concrete setting around a buried wire. The source sat inside Earth's future light cone. Not in some unreachable point far away, but on a curve that, if left untouched, would intersect precisely with a moment yet to pass. This wasn't a reflection. Not a delayed echo or a relic wandering past its death. The burst was alive in a geometry that hadn't touched present day yet. A shout from a place-time had not yet made real. Calculations refused to settle. Distortion maps twisted beyond the grasp of classical relativity. Someone tried to fold it into quantum error margins. Another pulled in cosmic inflation charts. None of it held. The signal existed outside causality, but within reach, which meant it wasn't sent toward Earth. It was waiting for Earth to arrive. Star maps sprawled across the projection wall, layers folded into layers, points of light, paths of extinction, blind zones where light bent too sharply to measure. She stood closest, eyes narrowing not at what was visible, but what refused to register. There, at the edge of Sector J22, a kink in the plotted distance. Not an object. A curvature artifact left behind by collapse. A smear in coordinates, subtle as a breath caught midward. Gravitational collapse doesn't vanish cleanly. A dead star leaves behind more than ash and drift. It wounds space, folds it. Pressure like that doesn't fade, it marks, it stretches, it lingers without needing to be seen. A gravitational lens flattens background light. But when the collapse is dense enough, sharp enough, it doesn't just bend light. It reroutes time. She ran backcasts through every redshift anomaly near the origin site. Most matched known masses. Galaxy tails, black hole pairs, gas collapse, binary mergers. One didn't. Too sharp. Too recent. No object left to claim it. Just a corner of the universe where light arrived wrong. Later than it should. Repeated more than once. The model took 3 hours to build. Not polished, not elegant, but functional. She mapped signal path not through empty space, but through decay. Each vector curved along gravitational residue, like a marble trapped in the groove of a glass plate. This wasn't emission from a place. It was transmission from a trajectory. The burst had followed no direct route. It had passed through a region warped by extinction, a scar left by something massive and gone. That distortion bent its path, slowed its climb, and hurled it forward along a track the present hadn't yet reached. The burst didn't originate at the grave of the star. It emerged when that star's dying light intersected a kink in spacetime still unfolding. A delay line. Not constructed. Not artificial. Natural in the same way that rivers find valleys, shaped by what collapsed before. Meaning the signal wasn't sent late. It was received early. No signal ever stands alone. Beneath every broadcast lies structure, rhythm stitched into silence, too deep for first scans to touch. So the filters came off again. Noise separation algorithms stripped the carrier layer clean. What remained wasn't empty. Bass frequencies repeated in warped intervals. Not random. Not atmospheric warble or interference drift. The pulse had spacing, irregular, but never accidental. Clusters rose from beneath the primary band like bones surfacing through snow. Each tone paired to another, always offset, always returning. But never identical. The signal hadn't come all at once. It was part of something layered. Not a burst, but a sequence. Not a message. A rhythm. One meant to be followed, not answered. Timelines were reconstructed using orbital data. The frequency curve locked itself not to the star's phantom location, but to Earth's own position in transit. Every harmonic coincided with orbital markers: perihelion shift, axial precession, lunar phase tide. The shape of the signal changed in response to where it was heard, not where it had come from. As though it wasn't speaking from a place at all. It was waiting on a rhythm. One set not by a transmitter, but a listener. The recursive model took weeks to draft. Not binary, not algorithmic. Harmonics reappeared at intervals too irregular for code. Instead, the spacing mirrored gravitational swings across Earth's orbit, tiny variations in field density, fluctuations most instruments filtered out as static. But the signal used them. Nested between those shifts, each recurrence grew sharper. More defined. Not additive. Corrective. Each new arrival wasn't new. It was a refinement of the last. Sharpened not at origin, but through its own reappearance. As though time itself carried the role of encoder, fine-tuning the content not with intention, but repetition. The recurrence model shattered one assumption. The signal did not originate from a moment, nor did it travel across clean space. It wasn't fired like a bullet. It arrived when Earth moved into alignment. Every appearance hinged not on distance, but position. Reception dictated occurrence. It wasn't sent to be found. It was written into the folds of time itself, waiting for one specific orbit to make sense, which meant others would follow. Not because they were cued, but because the planet would swing through those folds again. And again. The breach came through a maintenance node. Harmless on the surface, a diagnostics subroutine pinged too many times in the wrong window. 43 kilobytes siphoned in under 2 seconds. The full report hadn't yet been finalized. A working draft, incomplete, raw. But enough. By morning, screenshots circled fringe forums. A redacted spectrogram. Coordinate stamps. Misinterpreted annotations. By noon, the word signal had become message. By evening, message became warning. Macon sealed its outbound channels. Guest access revoked. On-site devices scanned and wiped. External collaborators placed on hold. Internal communication went back to paper when it could. Digital keys cycled every hour. The original leak. Likely unintentional. A technician, maybe. Or someone chasing recognition. But the damage had little to do with motive. It spread too fast for retraction. Too clean for denial. Speculation bloomed in the dark corners of the net. Some called it proof of interstellar diplomacy. Others called it prophecy. A countdown. A veiled threat. Terms like awakening, gateway, and return clung to headlines written in haste and fed through low-rent media pipelines. Algorithms rewarded the worst guesses first. She kept working. Notes stayed clinical. Tone didn't falter, not publicly. But the pauses between her recordings grew longer. Transitions sharper. As if thought had begun to tread water. The words changed too. Fewer explanations. More corrections. Not a warning. Not a call. Not origin-bound. No language in the structure. No syntax. No encryption layers. Just harmonics. Just recurrence. This wasn't mysticism. Not mythology or projection. It had no shape beyond the distortion that birthed it. It wasn't watching. It wasn't waiting. It simply was. She refused interviews, declined press requests, denounced the footage spliced from her lectures. None of them captured what mattered. Geometry, curvature, delay structure, a universe reusing its own folds. One morning, she re-recorded her prior log. Deleted the older version entirely. No backup archived. In the new version, she used fewer words. But one line stayed clear. It's not a voice. It's a rhythm shaped by gravity. The meaning isn't hidden. It isn't meant at all. The meaning is us. We're the interval. The spacing. The gap where signal becomes form. And form demands a listener. 72 hours before the timestamp struck, the room dimmed without warning. No outage. No alert. Just a soft hush across the equipment, as if something just outside the range of hearing had stepped closer. The instruments did not spike. They narrowed. Focused. Filters that usually caught background radiation began filtering nothing at all. Not emptiness. Absence. Then the pulse arrived. Sharper this time. Same carrier shape. Harmonics intact. But folded tighter. No drift. No delay. No measurable entropy loss. The burst came in cleaner than the first, as though it had never crossed distance. As if it had been placed directly into the receiver's mouth. Coordinates traced to a patch of sky with no history. No stars. No radiation. Not even static from long-cooled debris. A corridor of sky so consistently empty it had become shorthand among technicians. Nothing ever registered from that quadrant. Until now. The signal triangulated with 3 observatories. Time lag between them confirmed something few wanted to name. The origin moved. Not across space, but against time. Not backward. Not forward. Inward. Emission shifted toward the moment of observation with every recalibration. The delay grew shorter as Earth's rotation aligned with the time-stamped geometry. The burst didn't wait for receivers to aim. It intersected them. Not as target, as inevitability. Some called it confirmation. Others refused the language entirely. Models bent under the weight of the data. Traditional frames collapsed. Radiation curves showed energy profiles impossible under thermodynamic law. Reverse phase amplitude, temporal compression. A signal too clean to be carried, too measured to be random. Once projected backward, the path refused to resolve. No curve. No arc. Just a narrowing, like a river pressed into a slit of air. Every adjustment brought the origin closer to the present, not in distance, but in structure. The signal converged on a moment not yet reached. A point in time Earth was still moving toward. It had not been launched from somewhere. It had bled into spacetime through a wound no object had made. Not a message. Not even a call. A recurrence bound not to origin, but alignment. And alignment was drawing near. Phase resonance shouldn't exist without origin. Every signal bends from something. A pulse, a burst, a fire that burned hot enough to shape space. But the resonance pattern traced here didn't lean toward mass. It leaned toward intersection. They followed it backward, not to an object, not to decay, but to a place where paths met without anything to cast them. Gravitational lensing, yes, but lensing from absence. Light bent, but no body did the bending. Trajectories aligned as if following orders carved into the universe long before mass had names. 3 lensing fields overlapped in silence. Each one forged from separate collisions, separate death. Their intersection held no mass, no thermal remnants, no radiative decay. Yet it glowed. Not visibly. Not with light. With intention carved into waveform. An alignment born not from position, but from what no longer stood there. The signature of a voice without lungs. Models collapsed. Not failed. Collapsed. Folded inward, refusing to hold structure under a signal that broke the rule every physicist swore by. No origin, no causality. Still the data returned, harmonics clean, intervals precise, energy real. They stared at the focal point through instruments trained to detect light. It gave none. Not because it lacked brightness, but because light had no reason to emerge from where time held no shape. The signal wasn't from a star. It was from a shape that remembered one. Memory written into curvature. It became clear slowly, not from a single breakthrough, but from the piling weight of silence that surrounded each failed explanation. The signal didn't begin where the star had burned. It didn't trace a path across distance. It emerged from a distortion still echoing with the geometry of collapse. Space wasn't reporting what had happened. It was still reacting to what had once stood there. The past had not vanished. It had folded. The remnant of mass had gone cold, but its alignment had not released. The curvature hung, patient, unchanged, until something touched it, until Earth's orbit, Earth's field, Earth's timing stepped across the scar. That intersection rang. No object at the center. No source to isolate. Just resonance. Cold, unwavering, untethered to mass. Proof not of intention. Proof of persistence. Something in the shape of space itself had held on. The star had died. But space hadn't let it go. At 1342 Universal Time Coordinated, as the timestamp second drew breath across every aligned instrument, the array trembled. Not from impact, not from interference, but from recognition. The timing matched down to the fraction. The moment predicted arrived not as climax, but as preface. The third burst followed 2 seconds later. No prior warning. No harmonic build. No drift from predicted alignment. It simply appeared. Fully formed. Denser than the first, louder than the second, with modulation that bent sharply across the waveform, cutting patterns unfamiliar to any astrophysical registry. The data came through with a cadence no machine predicted. Not code. Not math. Not raw waveform. Shape. Pause. Rise. Fall. Something close to rhythm. Not natural rhythm. Human rhythm. Cadence that traced the breath of syllables. Not speech, but its skeleton. Across the noise, the signal carried breaks. Space left open, as if awaiting input. Incomplete. Fragmented. But the spine of structure was there. Enough to feel like language suspended in scaffolding. No vocabulary. No meaning. Just the architecture of intent. She ran the filters again. First for Morse. Then for phonetic stress. Then for machine learning linguistic map. None matched. But the intervals triggered something deeper. A pattern inside recognition. The kind that doesn't require translation, only presence. The timestamp embedded within wasn't for the present. Carried a new mark. June 19th. Next year. 12 months into a future that hadn't arrived, now held in a modulation shaped to mimic the way humans breathe between thoughts. None of the prior bursts had done this. The array staff waited for decoding, for meaning to clarify. But she didn't. She watched the wave flatten on the screen and knew the message had never been word. The signal had always been geometry. Harmonics. Recursion. This was no message sent across time. This was time responding to itself. A loop not yet closed. She stood at the rail that evening, the array stretched silent below, arms fixed toward a patch of sky still cooling from its last alignment. Lights below flickered across machinery unaware of the shape they had caught. No commentary. No final theory. Only one line written in the log. We thought we were observing history. But we were only catching up to what space already knew. Not a memory. Not a signal. A reflection written forward, waiting to be read backward. A loop with no origin. No destination. Only us passing through the middle. Thank you for watching and sticking with me to the end. Now, if you believe humanity deserves a future among the stars, do subscribe now. Only those who'd abandon Earth to its fate will scroll past.